The giant Lycan king found a pregnant woman struggling with firewood. What he did next melted hearts. Silence ruled the land, broken only by the whispering wind and the occasional crack of a branch under some unseen creature. Villagers from the nearby settlements often spoke of the forest in hushed tones, warning that monsters walked beneath its ancient boughs. But even their warnings could not keep Alara away. She struggled under the weight of a bundle of firewood, her hands red and raw from the cold. Each step was a battle against the icy ground, each breath visible in the crisp air. Her stomach, swollen with the life she carried, made every movement more difficult, but she refused to let herself rest. The fire she carried home would warm her child, and that thought gave her strength. The trees around her seemed to lean closer as she trudged deeper into the forest. Shadows flickered in the corner of her eyes, and she shivered, not from the cold alone. There were stories of a giant, a beast with fur like silver moonlight and eyes that glowed in the dark. They called him the Lycan King, a creature both feared and revered. Alara had never seen him. She hoped she never would, but her heart pounded with unease as if the forest itself warned her of his presence. A sudden snap of a branch behind her froze her in place. She held her breath, clutching the firewood tighter. The shadows stirred, and a figure emerged, larger than any man she had ever seen. His fur was silver, gleaming faintly in the dappled sunlight, and his eyes were deep pools of amber, intense and unyielding. He moved silently, yet every step seemed to make the earth itself shiver. Alara's heart threatened to burst from her chest. Fear rooted her in place, but curiosity and awe held her eyes on him. He was unlike anything she had imagined. The villagers' stories could not have done him justice. He was terrifying, yet there was a strange beauty in the way he moved, a grace that seemed almost royal despite his beastly form. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying through the trees like distant thunder. I'm just gathering firewood," Alara replied, her voice shaking, but she tried to sound braver than she felt. "I mean no harm." The Lycan King's gaze studied her, piercing and unrelenting. He tilted his head slightly, observing the life swelling beneath her clothes, the way she struggled with the bundle. A flicker of something human passed through his amber eyes, curiosity, concern, something he had long buried beneath centuries of solitude. Without a word, he stepped closer. The earth seemed to tremble beneath him, but instead of striking, he reached out with a massive hand and lifted the firewood from her arms. Alara stared at him, startled, unsure if she should run or faint. Why are you helping me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Because you are weak and I do not like to see weakness suffer," he said simply. His tone held no malice, only quiet authority. There was something in his voice, a depth that spoke of old pain and old power. Alara hesitated. The bundle was now lighter, yet she felt an invisible weight pressing on her chest, a mixture of fear and something she could not name. I can manage," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You are struggling," he said, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse race. "And yet you persist. That is admirable." Alara felt a warmth in her chest, a strange sense of comfort despite the fear. There was something about the way he spoke, the way he moved, that made her feel both small and significant at the same time. As they moved through the forest, he carried the firewood with ease, his long strides covering the ground quickly. Alara stumbled to keep up, her small feet sinking into the snow. The cold bit at her cheeks, but the presence of the Lycan King beside her made the air feel almost alive. "I've never seen a creature like you," she said finally, curiosity overcoming her fear. "I am not just a creature," he replied. "I am Kale, king of this forest, bound by a curse older than the villages you come from. Few see me and fewer survive to tell of it." Alara's eyes widened. "A curse?" Kale nodded, his expression darkening. "Long ago I was human, a prince of a distant land, but a witch, jealous of my power, cast a spell upon me. Now I am caught between beast and man. I walk these woods, feared by many, understood by none. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and frost. Alara felt a pang of sympathy for him. Despite his fearsome appearance, there was sorrow in his voice, a loneliness that mirrored her own. She had known hardship, isolation, and the constant fear of what the world might do to her child. Somehow, she understood the ache in Kale's amber eyes. They reached a small clearing where the snow lay deep and undisturbed. Kale placed the firewood gently on the ground, his massive hands surprisingly careful. "Rest," he commanded softly, his voice no longer imposing but protective. Alara sank to her knees in the snow, rubbing her hands to regain warmth. She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time she saw not just the beast but the man he once was. Something flickered in her chest, a strange, unfamiliar feeling like longing mixed with awe. Kale knelt beside her, his enormous hand hovering over hers. "The forest is dangerous," he said almost to himself. "And yet you are more vulnerable than I expected. The child you carry, I can feel it." Alara swallowed, her voice catching. I'm alone. My husband, he is gone." She paused, the tears threatening to spill. "I have no one to protect me." Kale's gaze softened, and he placed his hand over hers. The warmth of his fur and skin radiated through her gloves, seeping into her very bones. "Then I will protect you," he said simply. "While the curse allows me, I will stand between you and the dangers of this world." The words hung in the air, heavy and profound. Alara's fear ebbed slightly, replaced by a strange sense of safety she had not felt in months. And yet there was a tension, an unspoken understanding that being near him came with risks she could not yet comprehend. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying the scent of smoke. Alara's bundle of firewood slipped from her grasp, tumbling toward the frozen river at the edge of the clearing. Panic surged through her, and without thinking she ran toward it. Kale moved faster, faster than any human could. With one powerful leap, he reached the riverbank and scooped the firewood from the icy water before it sank. Alara skidded to a halt beside him, her breath ragged, her hands brushing against his in the icy water. The contact sent a shiver through her, not entirely from the cold. Kale looked down at her, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The forest was silent. The snow, the trees, the wind, they all faded into the background. "You are reckless," Kale said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "But I admire your courage." Alara's cheeks burned. I had to save it," she murmured, nodding toward the firewood. "It's all I have to keep my child warm." Kale's gaze softened further, a rare vulnerability shining through. "Then I will help you," he said, his massive hand now covering hers fully. "No storm, no snow, no hunter or beast shall harm you while I am near." The words felt like a promise, an unspoken bond forming between them. Alara wanted to believe him, wanted to feel safe in a world that had been unkind for so long. And for the first time in many nights, she felt a flicker of hope. As they made their way back toward the village, the snow falling softly around them, Alara walked a few steps behind Kale, her heart pounding not from fear, but from something else, something dangerous and thrilling. She could not deny the pull she felt toward him, nor the strange comfort in his presence. And Kale, walking through the forest he had ruled in solitude for centuries, felt something stir within him, something he thought he had lost forever. The stirrings of a heart capable of hope, capable of love. But the forest, with its ancient trees and whispered secrets, held more than snow and shadows. Somewhere deep in the north, a howl echoed through the mountains, a warning of hunters, of danger, of the world beyond their fragile, growing connection. Alara did not hear it. Kale did. And as the wind carried the sound toward them, he knew that the peace of this brief encounter was only the beginning. The snow fell heavier that night, blanketing the forest in a quiet, suffocating stillness. Alara's small village lay miles behind her, its smoke rising faintly in the distance. Ahead, the Lycan king, Kale, led her through a narrow path barely visible beneath the ice-laden trees. His massive form moved silently, yet each step seemed deliberate, as if the ground itself bent to his will. Alara struggled to keep up, her swollen belly making every step more difficult. She shivered despite the thick woolen clothes wrapped around her. Her heart, however, beat with a mixture of fear and wonder, for beside her walked the legendary creature she had only ever heard about in whispers, the Lycan king himself. "You tire too easily," Kale said, his deep voice echoing softly in the hollow of the forest. He glanced at her from the corner of his amber eyes. "The forest is merciless, but you are fragile even against its mildest challenge." I am fine," Alara said quickly, though the truth made her chest ache. She stumbled over a frozen root and would have fallen if Kale had not caught her in a strong arm. His hand, huge and rough, cradled her back with careful precision. "You overestimate your strength and underestimate your danger," he said, lowering her gently to her feet. "This world is not forgiving to the weak." Alara's gaze softened as she studied him. Despite his size, his movements were careful and deliberate, almost tender. She had expected a monster, but there was more to him, a presence that commanded both fear and respect, and a strange warmth she could not place. Finally, they reached a clearing where the ruins of a castle stood, its towers broken and its walls crumbling beneath the weight of centuries. Snow covered the stones, yet Kale's figure seemed to belong there, as though he had grown from the land itself. "This is where you live?" Alara asked, awe in her voice. Kale nodded. "This is my domain. Few dare enter and fewer survive to leave. Here I am both king and prisoner." Alara stepped cautiously, her fingers brushing against the frost-covered stones. "It feels lonely." "Loneliness is the curse that does not fade," Kale said softly. "Not even a king can escape it." She looked up at him, curiosity and compassion mingling in her gaze. "Was it always like this?" she asked. "Were you always alone?" Kale's amber eyes darkened. "No. I was once human, a prince of a distant kingdom. I had family, friends, love. But envy and magic turned my life into this. The witch's curse took my form, my people's trust, and my future. Now I exist between beast and man, feared by all, understood by none." Alara felt a shiver, not from the cold, but from the weight of his words. There was sorrow in him that echoed her own quiet fears. She too had known loss, though of a different kind. She had lost her husband before the child in her womb was born. Alone and unprotected, she had survived on courage and determination alone. "Then, you understand what it is to lose what matters most," she whispered. Kale's eyes softened for a moment. "Perhaps. I have learned many things in solitude. The world is cruel, but those who survive carry their strength quietly like embers beneath the snow." Alara nodded, taking a small step closer. "And yet, you are strong even against the curse." He tilted his head slightly, observing her. "Strength is not always enough. There is a danger in the curse, a part of me that I fight to contain. Were I to give in, it would destroy everything." I am not afraid," Alara said quietly, though her voice trembled. "I have survived fear all my life." "Perhaps you are not the only one who fights to protect something." Kale looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in decades he felt something stir within him. Her courage, quiet but unyielding, mirrored his own long-buried humanity. It was dangerous to feel, but he could not turn away. The night deepened, and the wind howled through the broken walls of the castle. Kale motioned for Alara to sit by what remained of a stone hearth. He knelt beside her, examining her carefully, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "You are cold," he said, wrapping his massive arm around her shoulders in a protective gesture. "You must rest. The storm outside will not forgive weakness." Alara looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. "Thank you," she said softly. For a moment they simply sat, listening to the wind as it tore through the empty halls. In that silence, a strange intimacy grew, unspoken yet undeniable. After a while, Kale rose and retrieved a few small logs from the snow-covered remnants of the hearth. With careful strength, he set them in place and struck a spark. The fire roared to life, throwing golden light across the cold stones. Alara warmed her hands, feeling comforted not just by the heat but by the presence of Kale nearby. "Do you ever regret being human?" she asked hesitantly. "Before the curse," Kale paused, watching the flames. "I regret the naivety of it," he said finally. "I regret trusting the world too easily, but I do not regret what I have become entirely. For in this form, I have learned more about myself than I ever could have as a human prince." Alara's heart softened. "Even if it's lonely." "Even if it's lonely," he admitted, his gaze flicking to hers. "There are moments, brief and fleeting, when something like connection, like understanding, pierces the darkness. You are such a moment." Her breath caught. She had not expected such words, and yet they touched something deep within her, a longing she had buried beneath grief and caution. The firelight danced across Kale's features, casting shadows that made him seem both terrifying and beautiful. Alara felt her pulse quicken, torn between fear and an unexplainable attraction. She looked away, focusing on the flames, but the warmth she felt was no longer just from the fire. "Kale, why do you help me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. "You could leave me to the cold. You could vanish into the forest as I feared." Kale's eyes met hers again, amber and intense. "Because I am drawn to you," he said quietly. "Not as a beast to a prey, not as a king to a subject, but because your spirit calls to something long buried in me. I do not fully understand it, but it is stronger than fear, stronger than the curse." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to step forward to reach for him, but uncertainty and fear held her back. I do not know what to say." "Then do not say anything," Kale replied softly. "Let your presence be enough." For a long while they sat in silence, the fire crackling, the wind howling outside. Each felt the weight of the other's gaze, the unspoken understanding of shared solitude and quiet longing. But the moment, fragile as it was, could not last unchallenged. From deep in the forest came a faint, eerie howl, followed by the sound of cracking branches and muffled voices. Kale stiffened, ears flicking toward the sound. The amber glow in his eyes intensified and his posture shifted, becoming more alert, more dangerous. "Hunters," he said, his voice low and tense. "They have found their way here." Alara's heart sank. She had sensed danger in the forest, but this felt immediate, tangible, like a shadow that could touch them at any moment. "Hunters," she whispered. Kale's massive hand brushed hers briefly, a gesture both reassuring and warning. "They seek to kill me, and anyone who aids me is in danger. You should leave." His voice faltered slightly, betraying a rare vulnerability. "But I will not let you go, not into the storm alone." Alara looked at him, fear and determination battling within her. "Then I will stay," she said firmly. "I will not run. If you fight, I fight too. If you fall, I cannot bear to lose you as well." Kale's eyes softened once more, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something unspoken passing between them. The tension in the room was unbearable yet thrilling, like standing on the edge of a cliff and daring to look down. The wind outside rose, whipping the firelight into dancing shadows across the broken walls. Kale stood, moving toward the main gate of the ruined castle, and Alara followed, her heart pounding in rhythm with his. They were about to face danger, yet neither of them spoke of retreat. Together they were stronger, and yet neither could ignore the growing bond, fragile as a snowflake, that bound them together. As they stepped into the cold night, the snow swirling around them, Kale's gaze met Alara's one last time. "Whatever happens," he said, "you have awakened something in me I thought was lost forever. I will protect that, even if it costs me everything." Alara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "And you have awakened hope in me," she whispered. Hope that even in darkness, someone can care, can protect, can love. The howl grew louder, closer, mingling with the snap of breaking branches. The hunters were coming. The night was about to erupt into chaos. But within the storm, two hearts had begun to find each other, fragile and trembling, yet unbreakable in their longing. The forest lay under the blood-red glow of the moon, casting long shadows across the snow-laden trees. Every branch seemed to tremble, and the wind carried the scent of danger, sharp and bitter. Alara's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her shawl, her heart racing with fear and anticipation. She could sense the hunters before they appeared, men driven by greed, ignorance, and fear, seeking to destroy the legendary Lycan king and anyone who dared protect him. Beside her, Kale moved with silent precision, his massive frame blending with the shadows. Amber eyes gleamed under the red moonlight, reflecting not just the rage of the beast, but the resolve of a man who had long walked the line between darkness and humanity. His hand rested lightly on hers, a gesture both protective and grounding. "We must be careful," Kale whispered, his deep voice barely audible over the howl of the wind. "They come in numbers and they are relentless, but they underestimate us, underestimate what we can do together." Alara nodded, drawing courage from his presence. Fear still gripped her heart, but she felt a strange strength stirring within. She was no longer merely a vulnerable woman carrying her child. She was a part of something greater now, a bond of trust, of courage, of hope. From the edge of the forest, the hunters' shadows began to move, breaking through the trees like creeping darkness. Their voices, rough and cruel, carried over the snow, calling for Kale, threatening to end the life he had long guarded with solitude and vigilance. Kale's stance shifted, a low growl rumbling from his chest. His fur bristled, and the power beneath his form seemed to vibrate through the frozen ground. Yet in that moment, his gaze fell upon Alara, and something softened within him. He could fight, yes, but he would not let the curse control him, not with her beside him. "Stay behind me," Kale instructed, but there was no harshness in his words, only a fierce protectiveness. Alara took her place slightly behind him, yet not out of fear. She wanted to stand with him, to face the storm by his side. The first hunter broke through the trees, his sword glinting in the moonlight. Kale's movement was fluid and precise, his hands larger than any human could be, yet careful, controlled. He disarmed the man with ease, holding him against a tree without harming him. "Leave," Kale commanded. "Leave now and speak of this night to no one." The hunter trembled, but greed and fear drove the others forward. More emerged from the forest, shouting, brandishing weapons. Kale's growl deepened, echoing through the trees, a sound that made the hunters hesitate. The legend was true, and now they faced the living myth. Alara's heart raced, yet she felt calm, strange as it seemed. She stepped forward slightly, raising her hands. "Wait," she called. Her voice, soft yet clear, carried over the tension. "You do not understand what you seek. You will only destroy yourselves if you continue." Kale turned his gaze to her, questioning. "Alara, I am not afraid," she said firmly, her eyes meeting his. "If they come for you, I will help. Together we can stop them without unnecessary bloodshed." Kale's amber eyes softened. Her courage, her trust, gave him strength beyond the power of his curse. He nodded once decisively, and together they faced the hunters. The night erupted in motion. Kale moved with astonishing speed and precision, his massive frame striking with controlled force, disarming, incapacitating, but never killing. Alara used the instincts she had learned from him, quick movements, careful positioning, and the voice of authority. She shouted commands, distracted the hunters, and helped Kale protect both herself and the innocent lives at stake. As the battle waged, Kale felt the pull of the curse, the wild, uncontrollable force within him, rising like a storm. His eyes glowed brighter, fangs threatening, claws itching. But then he felt Alara's hand brush against his, her gaze steady and unwavering. It anchored him. He could feel the humanity within him, the part that longed for connection, for love, for redemption fighting back the beast. The hunters faltered, sensing something beyond their understanding. They could see the Lycan King's strength, yes, but also the unspoken bond between the giant creature and the woman who dared stand beside him. Fear grew in their hearts, fear of something larger than violence, fear of the impossible unity between courage and power, love and might. Finally, with a final, commanding roar, Kale surged forward, disarming the remaining hunters and forcing them to retreat into the forest. Elara followed closely, her breath heavy but steady. The hunters vanished into the snow, leaving the forest silent once more, save for the rustle of leaves and the soft crackle of distant ice. Kale lowered himself to one knee, breathing heavily, but his gaze never left Elara. "You were brave," he said, amber eyes glimmering with admiration. "More than I expected. You stood with me, not behind me. That is rare." Elara smiled softly, her heart pounding from fear and relief alike. "I trusted you," she said simply, "and I believe in you, Kale. Not the curse, not the stories, but in you, the man you are beneath it all." Kale's massive hand reached for her, lifting her chin gently. I have feared this moment, feared opening my heart again. But you have shown me that even in the darkness there is light. Even in the curse there can be redemption." A quiet hush fell over the snow-covered forest. For the first time in centuries, Kale allowed himself to kneel, not as a beast or a king, but as a man, vulnerable and human. Elara stepped closer, her hand resting against his cheek, her touch soft yet full of meaning. "Redemption is not given," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is found in courage, in love, in choice. You chose to fight for it tonight." Kale closed his eyes briefly, leaning into her touch. When he opened them, the amber glow had softened, replaced by a depth of emotion he had not allowed himself to feel in decades. "Then you have given me hope," he said quietly. "Hope that I am not lost, that I can be more than a monster." The wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of frost and pine. Kale stood, lifting Elara gently into his arms, careful of her belly, careful of her heart. She felt safe, not just from the hunters, but from the cold, from the world, from the fear that had shadowed her life. "I promise you," Kale said, holding her close, "I will protect you and this child. Whatever comes, whatever storms, whatever darkness, we will face it together." Elara rested her head against his chest, feeling the strength in him, the warmth, the heartbeat beneath the fur and muscle. "And I promise," she whispered, "to stand with you, to trust you, to love you no matter what." The first rays of dawn began to break through the trees, painting the snow in pale gold. The forest seemed to hold its breath, watching as two hearts, battered and cautious, finally found each other. The curse was not gone. Kale could feel it, a quiet reminder that darkness would always linger, but its hold had weakened, softened by love, trust, and the courage of a single, extraordinary woman. Elara placed a hand over her belly, feeling the life growing within her. "Our child," she said softly, "will grow in a world we create, not one the curse dictates." Kale's amber eyes glimmered, reflecting the morning light and the fire within. "Yes," he said, voice filled with a rare tenderness. "Our world, ours to protect, ours to shape." They began the journey back to the castle ruins, their steps careful, yet lighter than before. The hunters had fled, the forest seemed calmer, and yet Kale remained vigilant. Shadows would always exist, threats would always linger, but for now there was peace, fragile but real. As they walked, Kale spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I was so sure I was lost to the curse, so certain that no one could reach me." He glanced at Elara, and a small, genuine smile softened his features. "And yet, here you are, and perhaps I am not lost at all." Elara smiled back, her heart full. "You are not lost, Kale. Not as long as you choose to fight, as long as you choose hope, as long as you let yourself love." The red moon faded behind the clouds, replaced by the soft, golden glow of morning. Snowflakes drifted around them, glimmering in the sunlight like scattered diamonds. For a moment the world felt still, perfect, and alive. But even in that stillness, Kale's ears twitched. A faint howl echoed in the mountains, a reminder that the world outside their fragile peace still held shadows. Yet neither fear nor hesitation could break the bond that had formed. Together they faced whatever came next, not as predator and prey, not as cursed and helpless, but as two hearts bound by courage, love, and the promise of redemption. Alara reached for Kale's hand, intertwining their fingers. "No matter what comes," she said, "we face it together." Kale's massive hand held hers firmly, the warmth and strength grounding them both. "Together," he agreed, voice deep, steady, and certain. And as they stood in the snow, the rising sun painting the forest in light, the legend of the Lycan king shifted forever. No longer a tale of fear, it became a story of courage, of love, and of the redemption that can bloom even in the darkest of winters.